Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Africa in Focus. Myself, Kwame, Ghanaian writer, broadcaster, journalist, historian, podcaster, and entrepreneur. And in this week's edition of Africa in Focus is a special oil, currency, power, and distraction. The hidden logic behind the Iran conflict. So that's the theme for this week's show. Oil, currency power, and distraction. The hidden logic behind the Iran conflict. And before we start the show, if you like what we hear, please share to your friends, family, social media networks, subscribe to Ghana African Focus on YouTube, hit the notification bell, meaning that every time we upload a new podcast, YouTube will notify you of that. Similarly, we're also on Spotify as well. Look out for Ghana African Focus on Spotify. Hit the follow button, meaning that Spotify will notify you every time we download a new podcast. All right, so we're also available on all the other mainstream podcasters, including TuneIn, Podcast Addict, Audible, and even Apple iTunes. Yep, so wherever you get your podcast from, you can tune into Ghana African Focus, okay? And also, as I mentioned for the past few weeks, Expat Live Ghana will be hosting a Ghana Relocation Summit to be held at the African Regional Hotel in Accra between April 1 and April 2. So if you'd like to be involved, you can still book your tickets. And I will leave you the link to the summit event in the front of the show. Okay, so if you are serious about wanting to relocate to Ghana, then this is a summit you must be part of, whether it's in person or whether you can do also virtually. So if you can't make it to Ghana on April 1 and April 2, you can also have the opportunity to listen to the summit virtually, okay? So like I said, I'll leave you the link as to how you can book your place at this event. That's going to feature business people in Ghana who are successful, lawyers talk about land issues in Ghana, also bankers telling you about different banking products and services in Ghana, and also government ministers as well, who will inform you as to why, as an African from the diaspora, you are welcome to Ghana and why you should come and invest in Ghana. So please, I will leave you the link in the front of the show if you are interested in coming to the Ghana Relocation Summit. That'll be held at the African Regional Hotel in Accra between April 1 and April 2. All right, so welcome to African Focus, where we cut through the noise and decode global events through African eyes, grounded in history, economics, and the hard truths the mainstream media avoids. So like I said, today's episode takes a simple but uncomfortable question. What if the conflict in Iran has got nothing to do with regime change, but everything to do with oil, currency power, and political distraction inside the United States? Well, we're going to break this down for you with clarity, with evidence, and with the Pan-African lens that exposes the deeper structure shaping our world. Right, so let's look at section 1, the petrodollar. So this is what this conflict in Iran is all about, the petrodollar, yeah? So, to understand any conflict, particularly in the Middle East, you must first understand the petrodollar system, yeah? So what is the petrodollar system? So in the 1970s, the United States of America struck a deal with Saudi Arabia, yeah, that all global oil would be priced and sold in US dollars because Saudi Arabia is the world's biggest producer of oil, yep, even back then, and it still is today. So this agreement created global demand for the US dollar, hence we call it petrodollar, a permanent market for US debt, a financial empire without colonies, a world where America could print money and buy real resources. So this is not about conspiracy theory, it's economic architecture. Now, here's the key point. Any nation that threatens to sell oil outside the dollar becomes a geopolitical problem. Yeah, you forgot Saddam in Iraq. He was thinking of selling oil in euros, and this is why the US got rid of him. Not because he was killing his own people, not because he was a threat to his neighbors, but because Saddam Hussein wanted to sell oil in euros, and that will go against the petrodollar. Look at just the other day, or before I come to that, Gaddafi, yeah, he wanted to set up an African central bank using gold, yeah, as the lingua franca, and that would destroy the petrodollar. So this is why, under Obama, they had to get rid of Gaddafi, yeah, under the lie that he was killing his own people and that he was a threat to his neighbors, blah, 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 blah. And even just the other day, Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro was thinking of selling oil in the Chinese yuan, yeah? So this is why Trump brazenly took him out by kidnapping a man and bringing him from Venezuela, Caracas, to New York, where, as we speak, Maduro is awaiting trial, possibly in an American kangaroo court. Yeah. So this is why you need to understand how important the petrodollar is to the world economic order. So analysts have pointed to examples like, I've mentioned, Iraq exploring euro-based oil sales, Libya proposing a gold-backed African dinar, Russia and China building non-dollar energy systems. But obviously, America cannot attack Russia and China because if it is, nuclear war. And now Iran, yeah, who have openly talked about trading oil in yuan or euros or even barter systems. So, listeners, when you hear regime change, democracy, or security threat, understand that beneath the slogans lies a simple economic truth. That is, the dollar must remain the world's energy currency by any means necessary, or America's global power weakens. So that's the importance of the petrodollar. Now we tackle section 2, which talks about Iran's position strategically. Now, Iran is not just another country in the so-called Middle East. Iran sits on some of the largest oil and gas reserves. Yeah. Iran also has a strategic coastline that you probably all know by now that controls the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of global oil flows. A political ideology, yeah, independent of Western influence. This is Iran. And also, Iran has a willingness to trade energy outside the dollar system. So, with all that combined, this makes Iran a structural threat, not an ideological one. So, if Iran successfully normalizes non-dollar oil trade, it sets a precedent that America cannot countenance. If that precedent spreads, the petrodollar weakens. If the petrodollar weakens, the US financial dominance ends. It's game over. Yeah? So this is why Iran is always in the crosshairs, because Iran is a very, very strategically important part of the world geopolitical or geoeconomic oil supply. Yeah? And so you have to understand why Iran has become a target, not because they're killing their own people, not because of the protests that took place earlier this year, where they killed something about 30,000 people. Yeah, I mean, didn't America, didn't they kill their people? Didn't ICE kill people in Minneapolis? And even before that, many of you are not aware that under Reagan, I think in 1986, yeah, there was a progressive black organization called Move, yeah, and Reagan ordered the troops to go into Move, who were based in Philadelphia, and they literally bombed them to death. Yeah, you can Google it. You can just Google it. Google the Move operation in US 1986. Yeah. So you know, let's not believe the propaganda coming out of the Western media that it's about, like I said, that it's about Iran killing the same people. It's about the so-called regime, blah blah blah. No, it's about the petrodollar and its importance to the American economy. So I've given you riders as to why this is. Now we're going to get into section 3, which looks at the domestic US angle, distraction and deflection. So political scientists have long observed a pattern. When domestic economic frustration rises, foreign conflicts receive more attention. Now, this is not about blaming any individual leader. It's about understanding political incentives. So when inflation is high, when wages stagnate, when economic indicators disappoint, leaders often shift their national conversation outward. So foreign conflict becomes a unifying narrative to which to rally the people of America, a distraction from domestic pressures, a way to project strength, and a way to control the news narrative. And this is precisely what's happening now in America. So that even comes nicely to that Trump has failed. So Trump said that he was going to make America great again. Trump said he was going to, make things good for the American people, but Trump has failed. In the 13 months that Trump has been in power in America, Trump has failed, right? And we're going to tell you why and how Trump has failed and why he's using this opportunity to bolster his popularity, right? And to, take attention away from his failure to, really, bring improvement to the American economy like he said he would after, criticizing Joe Biden, who he said had destroyed the economy. Now, let me give you some examples of why Trump has failed in America. So job growth has slowed down in America. So analysts have noted that job creation weakened during Trump's early period. Business Insider reported that the job markets in America slowed significantly, partly due to uncertainty around new policies on trade, immigration, and federal workforce changes. So we see particularly with the tariffs that Trump has imposed on the world, that has actually rebacked on Trump and is causing high inflation in America. But we'll get on to that in a minute. Now, historically, US job growth tends to be stronger under Democrats. Yeah. However, Trump's numbers do not break that pattern. Yeah. Again, growth. Yeah. So Trump said he'd bring growth to America, right? Particularly with the tariffs, right? But the Economist reported that around 410 days into Trump's term, yeah, GDP growth had fallen to 1.4% in the fourth quarter. This was a sharp drop from earlier quarters and signaled that the economy was not accelerating as Trump promised. Also, inflation reached 3%, which has eroded purchasing power in America and made wage gains feel weaker. Rising prices of food and domestic and consumables make consumers more cautious, especially with policy uncertainty in the background. So economists in America have cited uncertainty from Trump's proposed or actual changes to trade policy, immigration rules, and the federal workforce restructure. So basically, this uncertainty within America has affected consumers, job seekers, and small to medium-sized enterprises who, like the UK, are not hiring and not investing that much. Yeah. Now here's the big one. Trade deficit has worsened instead of improved. Now Trump, promised all these things about tariff that he'd bring jobs back to America and now he'll make America strong again. Now check this now. Trump promised to shrink the US trade deficit. Instead, the deficit has increased, continuing a long-term trend and contradicting his core economic message. Yeah. Now, factcheck.org notes that the trade deficit reached its highest level since 2008. Yeah, and that was the time of the global financial crisis, later in his term. And the early trajectory already showed no improvement. Yeah. So, all that I've explained to you shows that despite Trump's rhetoric, America is actually going backward. And this is why, in a way, this war is being used by Trump and his acolytes to deflect attention from his failure to grow the American economy, to provide jobs for the American economy, but more importantly, to make Americans better off than what he claimed that they were under Biden. Yeah? So this war is a welcome distraction from that. Now, we move into section 4, historical patterns, empire and energy. As an economic historian, I want to place this in the correct context. Now, we know America's empire, yeah? You just look at Africa, yeah? Or rather, just look at how many bases around the world America has. So empires do not collapse because of an ideology. They collapse because of currency, trade, and energy. Look at the British Empire, yeah? So after, Africans rebelled against the slave trade, yeah, and burnt a lot of, property, the British had to, concede to that, yeah, and end the chattel enslavement of African people. That was a big money spinner for the British Empire, yeah? So when enslavement ended, that precipitated the fall of the British Empire and thus decline of sterling. Again, similarly, the Ottoman Empire, what is now called Turkey, but it was called the Ottoman Empire, yeah? They lost the empire. That also resulted in lots of trade routes. Also, the Soviet Union and oil price shocks. So when the Soviet Union broke up into the republics that we see today, like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Georgia, Ukraine, all of these are part of the Soviet Union, yeah? But when it broke up, yeah, that created oil price shocks within Russia. So, currency power is the bloodstream of empire. And so the US dollar is the bloodstream of the modern American capitalist system, right? So if they lose the dollar, and this is why I make mention to the petrodollar, right? America's economy will crush like a stone. So when a nation like Iran challenges the system, that is the US dollar, which is the foundation of the American economy, right? The response is predictable. Not because of any morality, but because it becomes a structural necessity and also a survival mechanism. Because like I said, if the petrodollar goes, that is the downfall of the American empire, downfall of the American economy. Now, we're going to put in a Pan-African lens. Now, why this conflict? Why it matters to us? So as Africans, we need to understand these dynamics because, whether we like it or not, our economies are tied to global commodity prices. So we Africans, we don't control the global commodity prices. So for example, price of gold, which is again all-time high, $5,500, I believe. Silver, cotton, cocoa, oil, etc., we don't control those prices. Our currencies weaken when the dollar strengthens. Our development is shaped by global energy policies, and our leaders often adopt foreign narratives without essentially understanding the underlying economics. So when we understand, as African people, the petrodollar, we understand why African oil is priced in dollars. We understand why Gaddafi's attempt at the African Central Bank failed because it was competing with the US dollar. We also understand why African currencies remain weak, why African nations struggle to industrialize, and why global conflicts such as Iran ripples into our economics. Yeah? So this is just not just about Iran. It's about the architecture of global power or white supremacy and Africa's place in it. Yeah? And this is why Nkrumah invites Africa to unite. This is why I'm saying to listeners, right? Please go and read Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's book called Africa Must Unite or Africa Unite. Because he puts down a blueprint or a blueprint as to why Africa must unite. And when we have a global conflict like this, whereby it affects, for example, listeners at home, in all around the world, whether you're in Ghana, whether in the US, UK, whether in China listening to this podcast, right? Because of this war, the price of petrol you put in your car will go up. Just the conversation a week ago, Saturday. Yeah. And price of oil on the world market was about $70 a barrel. Today, as I'm recording this podcast, Saturday, 7th of March, yeah, petrol is now selling at $93 a barrel. So that's gone up by at least a quarter in just 1 week. Yeah. So what's going to happen? Yeah, if petrol goes to, as it is, the price of crude oil, as it's most likely to go to over $100 a barrel. Yeah, that's going to affect us in Africa. And this is why we got to come together for two things. A, all the producers of oil in Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, you want to put Libya there, Angola, Uganda, Equatorial Guinea, Congo, Brazzaville, all these are producers of oil in Africa. They must come together, yeah, and form, like I said, the African cartel of oil producers. Just like you got the what's it called? The other one, the Saudi one, I think it's called OPEC, the oil producing exporting countries. We in the African APEC, African petroleum exporting countries. Yeah, we come together as Africans, right? And we can dictate how much barrels that we're going to produce, and also more importantly, we can have a say as to how oil is priced, how much dollars we use dollars, we can dictate the price of dollars that we can prepare to sell oil. Again, this conference shows us why Africa must become energy. What are you looking for? Energy secure. Yeah, because this has a direct effect on our energy supplies. Country like Ghana, that imports a lot of oil. And this is why in Ghana, we got to make the Tema oil refinery workable. Yeah, because Tema oil refinery will allow us to refine oil into a finished product as to importing the raw oil and then having others refine it and then sending back to us at double or triple the price. So this is why in Ghana, Nigeria, which is one of the biggest producers in Africa, has only got one oil refinery. I think Dangote built a refinery last year. This is why Africa, we got to refine our own oil instead of other people, refining it. Also, gas. Under the West African gas pipeline, Ghana imports a lot of, gas that is used, LPG in Ghana, liquefied petroleum gas to cook food and what have you. Yeah, and even some taxi drivers in Ghana are using LPG to power their cars. So just imagine now, if we come together, right? All the gas producers in Ghana come together and we form a cartel, we would not be affected by the war going on right now in Iran because we have our own supplies, yeah, and what have you. So this is why it's important from a Pan-African view that this war is an opportunity for us to come together as oil producers and also, more importantly, first to be energy secure. Because in this volatile world that we're living in, right, particularly when you've got conflict like this one in the second Middle East, yeah, that can, make prices of oil and gas volatile. It is incumbent imperative on African countries to come together and unite, as Nkrumah stated and warned us about, to avoid situations like this, whereby because we're not united, we're isolated. Yeah. And when oil prices goes up, it affects our economies. For example, transportation, goods and services, lorry fare, school fees, food has a ripple effect. So this is why it's important from a Pan-African perspective that we come together and unite. So Pan-Africanism is not just about cultural pride. It is about economic literacy. It is geopolitical clarity. And it's also understanding the world as it is, right? Not as it's marketed, because it's marketed to us that we live in a global village. No, we don't. We don't live in a global village because we're not part of that village, right? It is a world dominated by the petrodollar, America, yeah? And so, and this war, by the way, is an illegal war because even the war has not been approved by the United Nations General Assembly, yeah? So it's just America and Israel taking their withdrawal to launch these attacks on Iran. So that shows you, right, that we Africans, we're not part of this world. Yeah, because you have to understand the world as it is. America can do what the bitch likes. Look when they took out Maduro in Venezuela. Was there a United Nations resolution on this? No, there wasn't. Was any African country invited to, at the negotiating table? No, there wasn't. Yeah. So Africans, we're not part of this world order. We need to understand that. So we need to understand the world as it really is, not as we think that we've been told that we're part of it. Yeah? So that moves on nicely to section 6. The hard-hitting critique, the narrative versus the reality. So here's the uncomfortable truth, right? Many people, right, in the public, whether you're in Africa, you're in Asia, you're in Europe, you're in North America, right? The public is really told the truth and the real reason behind foreign conflicts. Instead, we get simplified narratives, emotional language, moral framing, and so-called good versus evil storytelling. But like I said, behind the curtain, the real drivers are oil, currency, trade routes, domestic political pressure, and strategic influence. This is why I'm deliberating and giving you this podcast, because what you've heard in your media, whether it's in Africa, Asia, Europe, and America, is a one-way biased story. You're not being told the real reason why this war in Iran is happening. And like I said, got nothing to do with regime change, got nothing to do with, the Ayatollah and the Islamic Guard Council kidnapping people. It's about oil. Yeah, it's about the petrodollar and it's about trade routes. And so this brings to an end this edition of Africa in Focus with myself, Kwame. Today, we will peel back the layers behind the Iran conflict. We're not taking any sides because, again, Iran, believe it or not, there's African people that live in Iran, particularly south of Iran, and they're treated like slaves. So we have gone inside in this war. We don't favor the US, we don't favor Israel, and we don't favor Iran. However, but to understand the deeper economic and geopolitical forces shaping the world is why I'm bringing you this particular podcast. And particularly, if we want Africa to rise, we got to understand and understand the global system that we are operating within, yeah, which hitherto does not favor African countries. So knowledge is power, clarity is liberation, and analysis is resistance. So until next time, thank you for listening to this special edition of African Focus with myself, Kwame, Ghanaian writer, broadcaster, journalist, entrepreneur, and historian. Stay sharp, stay focused, and stay informed, and stay committed to the liberation of the African minds. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next edition of Africa in Focus.